Hello everyone, welcome back to English Champion. On this episode, we're going to look at an article from this week about grading at university campuses and how it's causing larger problems than just those little letters on students' report cards. So let's dive in. So this article comes from the website Inside Higher Education, which I read a lot, and this author is an administrator at Princeton. And her article is titled, Why Grade Complaints Are Misunderstood. Spoiler alert, students are not solely to blame. So the title is a little confusing. I'm not sure if she, from the start, meant that the students are misunderstanding grades or if teachers are misunderstanding the students' complaints about grades. The title could be better, but what she says is quite interesting here. She says a lot that I will disagree with, but she does make a couple really insightful points that I do want to highlight. A lot of times on these article reviews, I'm very critical, but I also want to point out when people say things that are really smart, and she presents something here in a moment that I'll share with you that is something I hadn't really heard fully explained before, and it made a lot of sense, and I liked it, and so I'll share that with you as we go. So she starts out by saying, when I first started teaching, I took it for granted that my students and I agreed on what grades meant. I didn't think twice about the syllabus language my first year writing program required of its instructors. When grading, I evaluate the words on the page before me and don't factor in external criteria like improvement or effort. The effort you put into an assignment will most certainly be evident in the paper you produce. So the first part of that is good, and that's how things kind of used to be, that everyone sort of understood that, look, I'm just grading what you hand in. I'm just grading the test. I'm just evaluating you by what I see on the page. This isn't anything about you. I'm not taking into account how many hours you say you studied or how difficult, your background has been in adjusting to this class. None of that. What you are, as far as your grade goes, is what you produce on the page. And everyone mostly agreed with that for a very long time. The second part of that, where she said the effort you put into an assignment will most certainly be evident in the paper you produce, not fully true, as we'll get into here in a second. Oftentimes, your effort and what you produce are not correlated hardly at all. So kind of half right there. She continues, but that was more than 15 years ago, and it would be an understatement to say that things are now much more complicated. At a fundamental level, grading purports to measure achieved competency both at a particular moment and over defined periods of time. In the process of measuring achievement, grades attempt to provide both internal feedback, ideally constructive input on how a student could continue to improve, along with a meaningful external metric of a student's comparative performance, how they're doing compared to everyone else in the class. This long-standing paradigm seems to be crumbling beneath our feet. Grade inflation, a trend that began on college campuses decades ago, accelerated during the pandemic and increasingly affects high schools as well. She references an article from NYU where apparently there was a dust up about students getting low grades in organic chemistry. There's also an article reference here about the high number of A's being given at Yale. Students are rejecting both parts of the grading consensus. They don't like the notion that some students will be graded more favorably than others, which is the external grading function, and often seek affirmation for what they've already accomplished instead of how they compare to the instructor's predetermined benchmark, a grade's internal private function. All right, so she's just laying the background of how we've used to think of grades and now why there's sort of a problem going on today. But while we might agree that attitudes around grading have changed, the reasons for this change are less clear. The default diagnosis often faults the students themselves, crediting large-scale generational shifts for this impasse born of the everyone gets a trophy mindset that has sustained Gen Z through bubble-wrapped childhoods. In this version of events, adults created a generation of students rife with entitlement, lacking in resilience, and too afflicted by concerns around identity politics and mental health to engage in the level of rigor that education demands. All right, so is that the only problem? And she's going to say no, but it's a pretty big one. And I'm glad that she pointed out that it is the young people, it's their life, they're to blame for this, but it's also the fault of their parents and their previous teachers who allowed all of this to occur. So she starts off by acknowledging that this is what people say is going on, and that is certainly part of it. It's not everything, but it is definitely playing a role. So she says, but I think it's too easy to make students the sole scapegoats. She didn't make the students the sole scapegoats. She also mentioned the people who train them to be that way. Instead, I credit two competing social impulses for this conflict, both of which I call discourses, because of the way we continually refer to these ideals in our shared language and commitments. discourse is a favorite word by academic people. This first one is very interesting. The first is what we call the discourse of effort, a perspective rooted deep in our national psyche through origin myths like the American dream. This discourse inevitably suggests that effort is what matters most and implies that an injustice has occurred when hoped-for goals fail to materialize. Little misinterpretation about the American dream. The American dream is not just about effort. It's a belief that your effort will lead to some form of accomplishment. You don't just achieve the American dream just by working hard. You're working hard in order to pursue something that you want to achieve or accomplish. Maybe it's to own a home. Maybe it's to, achieve a certain level of a career status, or whatever your version of. Maybe it's having a certain amount in the bank so that you can retire at a certain age. It's not just about trying hard. You actually have to aim at some accomplishment, and that is your American dream. These inferences are woven throughout the middle-class parenting milieu, where we're advised by educators and child psychologists to praise effort instead of outcomes. For example, you really worked hard to figure that out, instead of saying, you're so smart. So this is a lot of the growth mindset stuff that's been very popular in the last, whatever it's been, 10 years or so, where, you don't want to put an identity on a kid by saying, you're so smart. You want to praise them for the actions they took. And there's some validity to that. We want to praise the effort. We want to praise improvement. But also there's some downfalls to that, as we'll see here shortly. The shortcomings of this perspective will be painfully familiar to anyone who is the parent of a high schooler who put in hours of studying for a test only to get a B-. It's so unfair, the child might exclaim, before pointing out that a certain classmate claims to have studied far less and earned a higher grade. So this is something that's very common. I hear it. I heard it all the time over my many years in college classrooms, where you hand a student their paper back and it has a D on it, and they immediately go, but I worked really hard on this. I don't understand. And they have a very hard time grasping the fact that, yeah, but what you did wasn't good. What you did was not up to the standard of what an A or a B in this class requires. And they go, but I spent all this time writing it. I went to the tutoring center. And they don't understand, it doesn't matter. If you can't do it, you don't get the reward. That's just the way it goes. I always equate things to math because it's so black and white. It's so easy and cut and dry. It's like, let's say you studied for 8 hours for your math quiz, but on Monday morning on that quiz, when it said 2 + 2 and you wrote 5, I don't care how hard you worked on your studies over the weekend. You got the answer wrong. So you're not competent. Therefore, you don't get a high grade. That's how it works. The connection between hard work and the result you get is way less clear than young people think it is. I actually have an entire chapter in my book for students about how they can prepare for college to break free of that mindset, that it's about production, not about effort. It's about what can you do? How competent are you? Do you know that 2 + 2 = 4, not 5? You have to be able to do things properly if you want to get the reward, whether it's a grade, whether it's a paycheck, whatever it is. You can't just say, but I tried hard. That's not how life works. We respect you for trying hard, and that's very nice, and I hope that leads to improvements along the way. But at this moment in time, on this test or at the end of this semester, if you can't do the job that I've laid out for you, or that the test laid out for you, the syllabus laid out for you, the school has laid out for you, I'm sorry, but you're going to get a low grade, or you're going to get kicked out of school, whatever it is, you're going to get fired from the job. It doesn't matter. If you can't meet the standard, your effort really doesn't matter. That's just the breaks. Accepting this discourse of effort at face value is probably easiest for people who already enjoy socioeconomic advantages, who have minimal reasons to expect or anticipate structural obstacles, and maximum access to coaches, tutors, and superior educational settings that help students achieve their full potential. The privileging of effort, coupled with the difficulty of adequately measuring it, can also reinforce an implicit sense of entitlement. Notably, grade inflation has historically increased more at four-year colleges than community colleges and at whiter, wealthier schools. So that's all true. We've seen the data that for many years now, that Ivy League universities suffer the worst grade inflation, which seems like the opposite of what it should be. It's like, you're an Ivy League university. You should have the most rigorous classes possible. And yet it turns out they just give everyone A's. So that fact is certainly accurate. This idea of the privilege of effort is an interesting idea, because it kind of goes along with Rob Henderson's idea of luxury beliefs, that if you are part of a certain class, you can afford to have beliefs that really don't work for classes below you. So in this case, if you're from a very privileged background, you have two parents who are successful and provide everything you need, and you have access to all the best tutors, and you went to a great school with the best teachers, it's very likely that you can get by in your life by just having people tell you, yeah, just try really hard. It's your effort that matters. And even if you do poorly, there's sort of this safety net that you're going to end up fine anyway, because you're from a good family and you know successful people, and things will probably work out for you regardless. Whereas people lower than that, just trying hard doesn't work, because you don't have the fallback of everyone kind of keeping everything protected for you. You either do it or you don't. And if you don't, your life is going to be very difficult. For the other people, if they don't do the task, their life they don't suffer that much, you know. They're not going to end up at the highest CEO level or something maybe, but they're still going to probably end up okay. So this is why standards are so important, because those at the bottom, when you lower standards, or you just say, well, just work on your effort, it doesn't really matter how this turns out, just try really hard, it actually harms the people at the bottom the most, because they are most affected by the consequences of not being able to perform certain tasks, or have certain skills, or have certain knowledge. So this is why high standards are what we need for everybody. It keeps the privileged people accountable that, yeah, you had access to all these resources and extra help, but can you actually do it? Let's see. And it provides an opportunity for those who are more disadvantaged, kind of at the lower, whether it's class, whether it's intelligence, whatever it is, that if you can just do this task, you can move up the levels and be granted opportunities and become more successful than you otherwise would have been. This idea of, well, effort is all that matters is really harmful, and it's most harmful to the people who need it the most, who need the opportunities for standards the most, So very interesting idea. I hadn't really thought deeply about this discourse of effort, and so I'm glad she mentioned that. The second thing she's going to mention, I don't fully agree with, and I'll tell you why. This brings us to the second social impulse, which we might call the discourse of institutional equity, which has become central to many of our institutions over the past decade, and which emphasizes the pervasive structural obstacles that limit the achievements of students from historically minoritized populations. First, there are no structural obstacles that limit the achievements of anybody. If you can achieve something, you will get access to whatever you want. Okay? People will fall over themselves. Schools will bend over backwards to give you scholarships. Employers will give you special breaks to have you work for them. If you are actually a high achieving person, it does not matter what background you have. Especially today, it even might benefit you, because everyone wants quality. So if you're competent, you will get opportunities. When it says limit the achievements of students, there is no limit on achievement. There's limits on opportunities. There's limits on effort. You can only have so much of those things. But when you achieve things, you can have access to things that you want. And so that's just, I don't like the broad brush she's painting here. This paradigm undercuts many of the key tenets of the effort discourse, exposing a misalignment between effort and outcome for significant portions of the population. The language of diversity, equity, and inclusion itself hinges on acknowledging the different kind of effort required for low-income students to acquire the same academic achievements as their better resourced, often white peers. It depends on what you mean. This could be true. It's also not super true. As we said, yes, kids who grow up in an environment where you have private tutors and you have this amazing access to teachers, yeah, you're going to have better opportunities for success. That's definitely true. But the things that often lead to academic achievement are accessible to everyone. Okay, you don't have to have a private school education. You don't have to have a private tutor in your household to make you someone who can achieve things. The things that most people can just have access to reach a level of achievement are: how much time are you studying actually? How often do you use free tutoring services? How often do you go talk to your teacher and visit during office hours? Those are all things that anyone can do. Yeah, they require a little bit of effort, but it's not some different level of access. So when, in my many years of being a teacher, it's amazing how often I challenge students who have these frustrations. They're like, why am I getting a low grade? But I'm trying so hard. You know, I got good grades in high school. I don't understand. And I ask them, well, first of all, do you see all the mistakes? See all the red marks I made on your paper? Are you saying those aren't mistakes? Because there's a lot of them. That's why you have a low score. But also, how many drafts did you go through here? Did you actually go visit the writing center, the tutoring center, to get extra help? You never came into my office to get extra help from me. So when you say you put a lot of time in or put a lot of effort in, what exactly do you mean by that? Because the things that are very tangible and easy to access that would have led directly to an improved grade on that paper, you didn't do. So what are you complaining about? You're mad because you thought, based on your previous experience and what people have told you, you thought you were at this level. I awakened you to the fact that no, you're actually at this level on, in this class or on this assignment. And so you need to figure out how to get up to that other level. But, you could have done that. You could have used the resources that were available to you, and you didn't. So when someone, again, paints this very broad brush that certain people have these advantages, and therefore, their effort works out for them. These other people don't have access to resources, and therefore, no matter what effort they do, it doesn't produce achievement. And that's just not true. Everyone has access to opportunities for improvement. Yeah, they're not always the same, but you can always get better. There are always people ready to help you. I tell my students all the time, if you want help, I will help you. I never turn students away. If you come to my office, no matter what I'm doing, if I was going to go home for the night, if I was going to eat my lunch, whatever I was doing, and you come in and want help, I will stop everything and help you. And you know how many students take advantage of it? Almost none. In fact, you know what happens? This is one of the crazier things I have noticed in my many years as a professor. When I offer these things to help students use their effort more productively and try to actually improve so they can be high achievers, you know who utilizes those resources the most? Kids who are already pretty bright. It's amazing how many students I have who would come to my office and say, hey, I'd like to improve. Can you help me on, can we go over my last paper to help me improve on the next one? And I go, you got a 92 on your paper. You're doing pretty well. And they say, I know, but there's still, I think I can do better. Yeah, those kids are going to be superstars because they get it. That's what it takes to be successful. It's not who your parents were. It's not, did you have access to private tutors or anything? It's, did you ask for help? And did the person help you? And are you maximizing whatever intelligence you have? Yeah, those are the kids doing it. And that's the gap in our culture. The kids who should be using the resources that we're all providing for free aren't using them. I'll get to why here in a minute. And the kids who actually don't, they're going to do fine no matter what. They're the ones going, yeah, I'd like to get better at this. Help me learn more. I want to improve in this. Yeah, they're going to be great. And the goal is, how do we get more of those students? Instead of accommodating all the lower students who don't care, we need to turn students into those kids. Well, what we're doing now isn't working. All right, so she set up these two discourses, one about effort, one about this equity problem. She continues, unlike the discourse of effort, which is primarily individual in its focus, the second impulse is communal in nature, emphasizing how individuals' experiences and opportunities are shaped by their membership in larger socio-demographic categories. That's what I've been saying. Grades can be a constant reminder of persistent structural barriers to access, particularly in introductory STEM courses. So I'm not quite sure what point she's really making here. I'm guessing the point she's making is something like if a student who's from one of these demographics gets a low grade in a class, instead of incentivizing them to go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I was a D writer or a D math student. I better use the resources and better work harder and spend more time studying. In these kids' mind, maybe they think, well, this is just symbolic of the fact that everything's unfair and that there's inequity. And no matter what I do as a minority, I can't get ahead because, I'm trying and here I got a D. So I guess this just proves what I thought all along. I guess that's the point she's making, that this discourse of equity, when students see low grades, it just confirms something that they've thought or other people have taught them. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what her point really is with that. In spite of their differences, both discourses ask faculty to consider factors outside of the classroom, students' identities, their perceived efforts, the obstacles they have faced or are working to overcome when assessing how fairly they're evaluating students within it. So that's right. And that's why it's bad. When you focus on performance and that's it, that's what works. Plus, every student is different. How in the world can a teacher who has hundreds of students take into account every student's identity, how many hours each student put in? Were they quality hours? Where were you when you were studying? Like, what other obstacles you've had in your life? No teacher can possibly even understand all that, nor put it in some format that is measurable in an objective way that results in a grade. So why would you even do that? The whole point of having a standard of performance is so that you can reduce all of those things. You can flatten all that out and say, everyone's equal in this class. I don't care who you are, where you came from. You are equal in my eyes. All I care about is what's on the page or what's on the math test or whatever class we're in. That's the most fair and equal thing you can possibly do, is you take out all of the advantages people have had. You take out all the problems, all the structural, things that have gotten in the way. And you say, you know what? I don't care about any of that because I care about you as a person and I care about you being excellent. And so for all of us as equal people to be excellent, here's the measurement of excellence. So work towards this. That's the great thing about standards, is it makes all of it easier and it actually makes everyone more equal, which I would think we as educators would actually want. Perhaps the cruelest twist of irony, both discourses are frequently endorsed by the very same adults who are now in a position of evaluating students, even though these two paradigms often conflict with each other. Should we be surprised that everyone is confused? Yeah, that's exactly right. You got teachers talking about effort, and then you got other teachers talking about inequity, and then it all results in continued low grades. So it's not really helping. So yeah, it's very confusing. How do you get higher grades? To be clear, I don't think these social impulses themselves are the problem. We should encourage young people to acknowledge and work through individual setbacks, and we must recognize the structural problems of educational access and create institutional forms of advocacy and allyship to address them. Of course, that's what administrators say. At the same time, recognizing that students, parents, and instructors also endorse these impulses could inspire more productive conversations about what grades are actually meant to achieve. To that end, some of the most promising recent innovations in grading are those that work within these discourses of effort and equity rather than denying their pervasive influence. Here we get to the problems. I've mentioned these ideas on some other podcasts, but here they are again this week. So what are these grading strategies? For instance, mastery grading allows students to continue to submit work until they've achieved the grade they desire according to the standards the instructor has set. Okay. The grade they desire. What if a student only wants a C? Why should that be okay? I mean, it's passing, I guess, but shouldn't we be aiming higher? Shouldn't we be pushing students to be great? If a student goes, look, I just want a C in this class, or maybe a D, I just want to pass. I don't care how much I learn. Just let me do whatever I got to do to get my D plus and let me out of here. Is that the kind of environment we truly want? That doesn't seem like higher education. That doesn't seem like that's going to lead to employers wanting to hire our students. So when we have students like set out or aim at the grade they want to achieve, there's a problem with that. What also happens, okay, if you're in the classroom, especially in writing, this is a very big problem, because I've actually done something like this before where I thought, look, if kids want to improve, I'll keep incentivizing their improvement by regrading it, and I'll regrade it. However many times you want to turn in, I'll keep reading it and see how you're doing. The problem I discovered was what students do on their first submission is awful. Because why are they doing that? Well, it makes total rational sense. This is like economics rationalism 101. That student goes, well, if you'll just keep giving me second chances, then my first time I submit it, I'm going to just see what I get. I'm going to do as little work as possible. And if it ends up being a B plus, great. I got the high grade and I didn't even have to work hard. I just winged it and I did great. Perfect. Because the worst thing would be what we've been talking about before, which is, well, I put in tons of hours of effort and I got a low grade. Well, if you're going to regrade it every time, why would they even go to the effort of putting forth the effort the first time? It makes much more sense for a student, if you have this mastery grading situation, for students to just go, I'll just wing it this first time, see what happens. If I get a low score, all right, that's what the second chances are for. But if I get a high score, I get all the benefits and I didn't have to do any of the real work. Like, that's probably not what we want to incentivize either. So, ironically, when she said, this will integrate the effort idea, it's like, yeah, maybe. It also completely undermines effort because the students, once they just reach whatever level they feel comfortable with, they just stop. And also, the first level that they're at is their lowest. It's always terrible. So in my classes, I make everything super valuable all the time. So students always know they have to put forth their best effort all the time. There is no like, well, I don't want to try hard on this one because he'll give me a second chance anyway. That's not how life works, and that's not what produces excellence in a classroom. She says this may be particularly useful in STEM courses where students can struggle at the beginning of the term but achieve proficiency through repeated practice. This recognizes that some students will need more time to achieve competency but still verifies that students have acquired a particular set of skills before progressing in a course sequence. This is very difficult because I'm friends with biology professors who flat out tell you the way the course is structured, you have to know this before you go on to this. And you have to know these 8 things before you get to the 9th thing. Everything builds on top of each other. And so it's like, if a professor is waiting for you to catch up, and by week 10 of a semester, you finally got the first thing handled, and you're like, okay, I'm competent at this first thing now. You look back, you're like, dude, we left you behind 10 weeks ago. You're not competent enough for this, advanced biology class or whatever. So this really depends on how the semester is structured. So I don't understand how this is particularly useful for STEM courses where everything in STEM, math, engineering, again, biology, any of the sciences, everything builds on top of each other. You can't sit around and wait for someone to achieve competency at one level. And if they never get there, you just keep teaching them at this level. That's not how it works. That kid needs to flunk. If you can't keep up, that's not the field for you. Now, the way to get around all this, you don't need some special grading system, okay? What real teachers do is you organize your course in a way that you have enough assessments so that if a student happens to bomb the first one, it's not going to kill them, all right? What it does, though, is it should be a huge wake-up call. And the student goes, whoa, I thought I was going to be better at this. I got a C- on this paper. I better get it in check for the next project, because if this happens again, I'm in big trouble for the rest of the semester. So you can't have, as a writing professor or, whatever courses you teach. In writing, I always had like 6 essays due in a semester. 6 because it allowed me to have enough iterations for me to tell, one, that you're improving, but also for me to challenge you over several different writing scenarios that accomplish the main goal of the class. So you can't just have a student write one paper and go, your whole grade relies on one paper. Well, how stressful is that? That's not good. And it doesn't allow for improvement. Improvement is important. Effort is important. And over 6 papers, I can tell, okay, this is what type of student you are. You're a C+ student. And I feel confident And students, by the end of the semester, they never argue with me because I'm like, look, this is how you performed. This is the type of writer you are, at least right now in this class. So this is the grade you get. But all that comes with how you organize your course. You don't need some weird grading system. You don't need to develop these elaborate second chance mechanisms. The second chance of a normal class was paper number 2 in my class. Okay, if you bomb one, your second chance is do better on the next one. That's how it goes. It's just like in sports. Okay, you play the football game, you lose the game. You don't get a second chance at that game. What's your chance for improvement? Well, we play again next week. Let's do better then. So let's work hard and practice all week so that when we have another chance, we perform better and maybe we win that game. That's improvement. That's effort. That's having a standard. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. There's no, well, you played hard, so I guess you won the game. No, doesn't matter how hard you play. It matters what the scoreboard says at the end. Did you win or did you lose? That's it. Doesn't matter how hard you worked on this math test. If you wrote 2 + 2 = 5, that's it. You're out. You lose that game. You get a low score on that paper. You get a bad grade on that test. That's it. There's consequences in the real world. And this is what we need to be training students as early as possible. This is a college thing, but we should be doing this since first grade. That there have to be standards. Here's what it takes to reach them. And if you don't, there's going to be consequences. You need to either go back to the beginning, you need to be held back a year, you need to flunk, you need to switch majors, whatever. But there is a consequence if you do not have the standards, because there's consequences in the real world too. So a second option she gives. Similarly, contract grading or specifications grading harnesses individual student investment and effort, linking a grade to each student's self-identified goals for engagement and growth throughout the course. So this is one of the dumber ones. I even discussed this in one of my classes, and even my students were like, yeah, that seems like a really bad idea. Don't students just totally like cheat and take advantage of the professor in this situation? I was like, yeah, of course they do. So in contract grading, when the examples I've seen over the years is something like a professor, they might discuss it with a student and lay it out on an individual basis, or they might have these levels. I've seen it both ways, where the professor says, to get an A, here's what you have to do. And then the student goes, here's what I promise to do. And if I promise to do these things, you'll give me an A. And the teacher goes, yes, of course. And it might be like, I promise I will read 300 pages this semester, and I will, visit the writing center this many times, and I'll do it's all these little levels. And at the end, the teacher just goes, well, did you do those things? And you go, yep. You go, okay, here's your A. It doesn't matter how competent you are at the end. It's about, like it said, individual student investment and effort, according to each student's self-identified goals for engagement and growth. That doesn't mean you're competent. Yeah, you might have grown a lot, and that's great. You might have even improved and, honed your skills or learned some new knowledge. That's fantastic. But at the end of the semester, if you haven't achieved the standard of competence, then why am I giving you an A? So this is even worse than the mastery grading. At least mastery kind of can work in a theoretical sense, and it may even in some situations be fairly productive. But contract grading, where the student can just fake their way through it, and because you agreed to it, you have to accept it, is crazy town. Do not do that. At their core, these techniques promise students the chance to iterate and grow, provided that they engage with feedback from their instructors, everything that aligns with both the discourse of effort and the discourse of equity. No, they're still bad. Again, just another example in my writing classes. Kind of like the mastery grading, one thing I do is I implement that kind of mastery thing on the pre-writing side. I tell students, I will go over this with you as many times as you want. Like I said, I invite students to my office, or I'll meet with you after class. As many times as you want, I will help you in the drafting stage. But once you turn it in, that's the grade. And so what it does is it incentivizes students to work hard during the process, during the learning stage, not afterwards, not after you go, well, that wasn't what I wanted, so I guess now I want a second chance. No, it says, here's the standard. This is what an A paper is. If you want an A, I'll help you get there. But once it's submitted for a grade, here's the due date. After this due date, you're done. That's the grade. And it incentivizes kids to work really, really hard beforehand. And then at the end, there's no confusion about the grade, because if they get a low grade and they didn't utilize my help all along the way, I can go, hey man, I offered to help you. You didn't want it. So why are you surprised you got a low grade? Whereas the other students who actually use it, and then they get their A or their B, and they're happy because they saw their effort in the pre-writing process paid off when it came to handing that paper in. And now they go, well, now I know what to do for next time. Either I'll take in all the things that the professor taught me during our private sessions, and I'll just do those myself. Or better yet, what they usually do is they're in my office next week. They're like, let's start working on the next paper. I'm ready to go. Let's start, I got a draft for you. Will you read it? And I say, absolutely. Let's dive in. That's what you want. That's the engagement. That's the growth. That's the effort that you actually want. And as I've been saying in other videos, that's where the mentorship process, the apprenticeship model comes in education, because that's where these kinds of opportunities for growth actually happen. You don't need some weird grading system. Their primary shortcoming, aside from the significant investment of time they require of faculty, is that a final grade may primarily reflect progress rather than a student's competency at a particular time. Exactly what I just said. These and other ungrading methods also lack the ability to differentiate one student's final grade from another's, since these student-directed forms of assessment can be measuring very different things from one student to the next. Exactly. How in the world at the end of the semester do you say, yes, all of my students are competent at this level, when they all had their individualized grading plan things and their different mastery levels of growth or whatever nonsense that is? Like, how do you even demonstrate that your class has actually learned when everyone was learning at different levels? That's silly. So she's exactly right here. Moving out of the grading impasse, then, may require a deeper rethinking of not just what grades represent, but how systems of education engage, measure, track, and invest in actual learning. Are we more interested in ranking and differentiating students, or in prioritizing learning in all of its different forms? I don't think it's necessarily an or question there. I think you can do both. You need to differentiate students, rank them, have them, measure their competence levels, and also work on the learning and the growth elements. But ultimately, the end goal of education in college, and I would say even at the lower grades, is differentiating. It's to say, these kids did it, these kids didn't. These kids know that 2 + 2 = 4. These kids still think it's 2 + 2 = 5. There's the difference. So you should hire these kids for that type of job. That's what the goal of education is, sort of. I don't know if it's not what it's supposed to be, but that's just what it is, until universities change. And I'll get to that here as we conclude the paper or the article. Reconciling the discourses of effort and equity could ultimately lead us to new ways of grading that transcend the first few letters of the alphabet. Yeah. Are letter grades the best way? I don't know. But whatever people decide on, it has to be a clear indicator of excellence or competence, whatever that is, where everyone can see it. All right. The professor who taught you in the class can see that by the end of the semester, you're a good writer. That's why you got an A in this class. And the person who's going to hire you to be a journalist or, work at some publication can also tell that you're a good writer, so that they match, that the professor's version and the employer's version align. I thought that was kind of the point that all these people wanted, that we can help these kids get good jobs, or in whatever, the field of biology. The biology professor says, yes, you've earned an A in this class because you've accomplished these things. You are competent in your knowledge and skills of the field of biology. So then when they want to go to med school, or they want to work at a lab, or they want to do research or something, the people they work with can all go, they can see by your things you produce, oh, okay, you're competent. You know what you're doing. And so again, the employer or the colleagues and the professors match. Right now what's happening is we have professors handing out grades, not based on competence, and then the kids go out into the real world, and the job providers, the employers, try to hire them, or they try to give them certain tasks, and they go, yeah, you're not qualified. I hired you to be an accountant. You, your transcript said that you got A's in accounting. You don't know accounting. How did you get A's? You're not qualified to be an accountant. That's what's happening. And universities are not paying attention. That when employers are saying our young people today are not skilled enough, our college professors go, well, we need to adjust the way we grade. No, that's not what happens. You need to adjust your standards so there's more competence and excellence. Then there would be the alignment between their education and the jobs they're offered, and everyone would be happier. But that's not what's happening right now. This idea of effort being all that matters, or that continued improvement is all that matters. It's just, like I say so many times, it's the opposite of how everything in the world works. You don't take a group of Marines and go, okay, we're going to do some training exercises and we want you to really improve at this. That's not how it goes. What the Marines do is they say, here's the standard to be a Marine. If you want to be a Marine and be the toughest people on the planet, here's what it takes. And then the people who think they want to be Marines go, whoa, that's going to require a lot of effort. Either I drop out and go do something else because I'm not cut out to be a Marine, or they say, let's get after it. I better bust my backside because it's going to take a lot of work to get to that level. That's how you get Marines. That's how you get excellence. We don't start at the effort side. We don't say, just try really hard. And if you do, then that'll lead to good things. No, you have to have something you're aiming at first. And that aiming at point, that standard should be something excellent. And right now we don't do that. We don't aim at excellence. We aim at just completion, I guess, just certification, like get through your degree or, your 4-year course load so that you get this piece of paper. Like there's no indicator of excellence anymore. And that's what the employers are harping on it about. They're saying, you need to prepare people better. If you don't, we're going to come up with our own training programs. We're going to come up with alternative forms of education because you universities aren't doing your job the way we expected you to. And here's what teachers do. Well, we just need more effort. No, it doesn't start with the effort. It starts with the standard. The standard informs how much effort is going to be required. When you start at the effort, how do you even know what you're aiming at? How do you even know your effort's going to pay off? Because then we get the problems like that she talked about at the beginning where you're like, but I thought I put in effort. Why didn't I get a good grade? Because you started with the effort instead of the standard. That's the problem. Or maybe you think that the Marine example is too exaggerated. And you're thinking, there's no comparison between being in the Marines and taking a freshman level math class or something like that. Fine. Take it down to something that occurs every single day in everyone's, every single day across the country and in all of our lives. Let's say your car breaks down and you have to go to a mechanic. What is your goal when you go to the mechanic? To have them solve the problem by using their skill at a competent level so that I can drive again. I don't care how long it takes for the mechanic to work on my car. If after 3 hours he comes back covered in sweat and dirt and he goes, you know what, I tried really hard. I put forth a lot of effort, but I couldn't get your car running. But I tried, sorry. Or would I rather have a mechanic who I drop it off and 5 minutes later he comes back and goes, yep, no problem, fixed it, you're all set to go. Who's the better mechanic? It doesn't matter how hard you work. What matters is, do you get the job done? That's what matters. And people who get the job done, they're the ones who make the money. The students who get the job done get the grades. That's how it works. It's not an indicator of whether you're a good person or even, it's not even diminishing your effort. That was important. But what matters more is, can you do it? That's it. And many college students just aren't cutting it. They're not able to do the tasks we need them to do. As I tell my students, it's just like in Empire Strikes Back when Luke is training with Yoda and he's trying to teach him how to be a Jedi, and Luke goes, yeah, I'll try. And Yoda says, no, there is no try. It's do or do not. There is no try. You either do it or you don't. And we need more college students. We need more employees out in the world who can do it, not just try hard. It doesn't matter if that skill is being a heart surgeon or an auto mechanic or an airline pilot or whatever, driving a truck to deliver groceries. It doesn't matter what it is. We need people who can do the job, not just say they put forth effort in doing the job. So if we're gonna improve all levels of education, not just universities, we have to reframe how we think about education. We've gone so far off track with the idea that everyone needs to go to college. And so then we get kids who show up at college who have no desire to actually be at college. Just because a kid shows up at college doesn't mean they want to be there. And then they do poorly. And then we go, well, gosh, maybe it's our grading standards that are the problem. No, it's because they didn't care about any of this. They're either there to socialize, they're there to, hang on to the last remnants of whatever athletic ability they think they have by playing a sport that they're never going to play professional in. Or they got told by their parents or some school guidance counselor that you have to, or some politician or whoever else that's saying you need college. You have to do that. If you don't go to college, you're going to be a failure in life. And that's flat out not true. So what we need at the college level are people who actually want to be in college. That solves all of this. Yeah, are enrollments going to go down? Well, of course they are. Is funding, is the money pouring in going to decrease? Well, of course, there's going to be fewer students. But at least the students who would be there would know what the standard is. They would know the effort it takes to achieve that standard. And then we'd all be on the same page, because now the employers would go, well, you must have really wanted to be at college, because I know that college, if you weren't cut out for it, they would have kicked you out. They would have flunked you and you would have had to drop out. Or they wouldn't have let you in the first place, better yet. And so now the employers can be confident that we've done our job, and we can be, honest with students by telling them, here's exactly what it takes. If you want to be successful in this course, at this university, in that job, whatever it is, here's what it takes. It's up to you to meet it. If you want to meet it, great. If you don't, don't. And we don't do that. Universities do not do that. They tell everybody, come to our school. We'll help you get this job. Meanwhile, the student does not care anything about studying for that career field. They don't care about school. So why are you making them go through school? We need to change the schooling process, and standards is where that happens. So I'm very passionate about this because, I've worked at a number of different universities, again, big, small, public, private. I've done it all for many years, and I've continued to see the degradation of the university over that time. And what it is, it's a money grab. Instead of focusing on education, instead of preparing students for excellence, not only in academics, but in their real lives, work life, personal life, spiritual life, free time life, whatever it is. Instead, we go, come to our school and pay us your money. That'll be $120,000, please, or $200,000, please, or whatever it is. I know you don't actually like school, and I know you're not actually going to study in these classes, but if you just play along with it and give us your money, we'll give you C's and D's, and you'll leave here with a piece of paper, and hopefully that gets you a job. And then the job people go, yeah, dude, you're not qualified. Take a hike. And that's why I'll talk about this in a later video, but the stats are out now that it's over 50% of college graduates are working jobs that don't require college degrees. So why did they go to college? Now, I believe college is actually not for job training. That's a different lesson. But this is what every other university says. We will help you get a certain job and make a certain income and live a certain type of life. So come to our school and get a degree. And that's just not happening. It's not true, except for a very select few. And those people were going to be successful anyway. Again, it's like my students I've had in my class where, like, you're doing fine and you're here doing extra. You don't need to do that. Well, the reason they're doing it is because they're going to be superstars. They're going to be successful no matter what they do, because they're the type of people who want to be successful. The majority of students at today's universities are not those types of people. They're there because they got dragged there by the culture, or they got incentivized there by some coach or some scholarship that isn't real, and the schools are just making money off them. That's what all this is. It's not about standards. It's not about excellence. It's about how much money can they squeeze out of students, and then hand them a piece of paper and say, look, we did what we promised. We gave you an education. And really the education was all this silly grading nonsense. So Until universities figure this out, as I've been saying in the last couple podcasts, the problems in the culture are going to keep happening, where employers are going to keep getting mad, enrollments are going to keep declining because students are realizing, yeah, school isn't really helping me, so maybe I shouldn't go. Until they figure that out, it's going to keep getting worse. So hopefully that clarifies some things for you out there. The idea of grading has been, a contentious one for a while. There's lots of crazy ideas out there, and it's so simple. Here's a standard of excellence. You either meet it or you don't. That's it. It's very easy. That's all. Thanks for listening. See you next time.